So this morning I want to talk about some similarities between pre-World War One Weimar Republic and the United States today. Um, I'll go straight to it, but I want to go to James first. James 4. James 4 and verse 1. You can. I'm saying you can theoretically use a scripture to predict a coming war and to prepare yourselves. Right here, James 4 and verse 1. From whence comes wars and fighting among you? Don't they come? Or come they not hence, even from your lust at war in your members? Well, we all know this. I mean, this is elementary. You lust and you have not. You kill and you desire to have and cannot obtain. You fight in war, and yet you have not because you ask not. And if you ask, you receive not because you ask amiss that you may consume it upon your lust. Folks, the United States of America today, and quite frankly, all of Western civilization, Europe, once again, Western civilization, is a classic example of that happening right now. When you obtain it, you consume it upon your lusts. Not just Western civilization, we're also talking about the oil producing countries. So what does he say? You adulterers and adulteresses, don't you know that the friendship of this world is enemy with Jehovah? Now, what is he saying here? He's saying that friendship of the world is essentially adultery, figuratively speaking. Whosoever then will be a friend of this world is an enemy of Jehovah. Why are people friends with this world? Because being friends with the world will make you rich. All right. We see that right here that wars and fightings comes from the lust inside to consume in an inordinate way. We see that, like I said, happening right now as we speak. And the consequences be damned. This is how this is treated. So let's look at the hyperinflation in the Weimar Republic, how it started, and where it ended up. Hyperinflation in the German papier mark, the currency of the Weimar Republic, between 1921 and 1923. It caused considerable internal political instability in the country and the occupation of the Ruhr by France and Belgium, as well as misery for the general populace. To pay for the large costs of the ongoing First World War, Germany suspended the gold standard, the convertibility of its currency to gold, when the war broke out. Now, interestingly enough, the United States government has done the very same thing. This was back in the Well, it was when Richard Nixon was president, I do believe. It became backed by oil instead of backed by gold. And I'm not even sure if that's correct. But let's be honest, folks, the dollar is no longer backed by gold. I'll continue reading. Unlike France, which imposed its first income tax to pay for the war, German Emperor Wilhelm II and Reichstag decided unanimously to fund the war entirely by borrowing. This was before World War I. Borrowing? What is the United States doing? Borrowing, 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 borrowing. A decision criticized by financial experts such as, I I can't say this name, you figure it out, as a dangerous risk for currency devaluation. The government believed that it would be able to pay off the debt by winning the war. Well, the United States is borrowing and borrowing trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars. For what? For what? If you go back to James 4, it is to consume in lust. And this kind of activity is the same as adultery. Go back to James 4. Just look at it carefully, folks. From whence come wars and fighting among you? Don't they come even from your lust at war in your members? You lust and you have not. You kill and desire to have and cannot obtain. You fight in war and you have not because you ask not. You ask not, or you ask and you receive not because you ask amiss that you may consume it in your lusts. The very first words after James talks about lust is adulterers and adulteresses. And he calls that this consumption of goods in their own lust, he calls it adultery, and he calls it friendship of the world, and that is the enemy of Jehovah. And this is the reason why, folks, when you read Revelation 3, and you read about the church in Laodicea, it says that that particular church say they are increased with goods and have need of nothing, and they do not know that they're miserable, poor, blind, and naked, and that the Messiah will spew them out of his mouth. So let's go back to this hyperinflation. The government believed that it would be able to pay off the debt by winning the war, which would be able to annex resource-rich industrial territory in the West and in the East. Yes, by stealing and by killing. Well, there's got to be a motive, a reason behind the U.S. government thinking that it can borrow billions and billions and trillions of dollars. There's got to be a reason they think that they can pay for it. What is it? The exchange rate of the mark against the U.S. dollar thus steadily devalued from 4.2 to 7.9 marks per dollar, a preliminary to the extreme post-war inflation. The strategy failed when Germany lost the war. Well, imagine that. The new Weimar Republic was saddled with a massive war debt that it could not afford. That was worsened by the fact that it was printing money without economic resources to back it. The Treaty of Versailles, with its demands for reparations, further accelerated the decline of the value of the mark so that 48 paper marks were required to buy a U.S. dollar by late 1919. German currency was relatively stable at about 90 marks per dollar during the first half of 1921 because the World War I Western Front had been mostly in France and Belgium. Germany came out of the war with most of its industrial infrastructure intact. It was in a better position to become the dominant economic force on the European continent. In April 1921, the Reparations Commission announced the London Payment Plan, under which Germany would pay reparations in gold or foreign currency in annual installments of 2 billion gold marks, plus 26% of the value of German exports. This was accepted by Germany, and after Allied ultimatum the following month. The first payment was made when it came due in June 1921. It marked the beginning of an increasingly rapid devaluation of the mark, which fell in value to approximately 330 marks per dollar. The total reparations demanded were 132 billion gold marks, but Germany had to pay only 50 billion marks. I suppose that meant the other countries who were involved in World War I had to pay the rest. Since reparations were required to be repaid in hard currency, not the rapid depreciation paper mark, one strategy that Germany used was the mass printing of banknotes to buy foreign currency, which was then used to pay reparations. Yes, robbing Bill to pay Paul, greatly exacerbating the inflation of the paper mark. Late in 1922, Germany failed to pay France an installment of reparations on time, and France responded in January 1923 by sending troops to occupy the Ruhr, Germany's main industrial region. The German government ordered a policy of passive resistance in the Ruhr. Workers were told to do nothing which helped the invaders in any way. This meant, and in practice, was a general strike. But all the workers on strike had to be given financial support. The government paid its way by printing more and more banknotes. Well, this is what the United States of America is doing right now, printing more and more. But what war? Is the United States under occupation? What kind of consequences are going to happen to the United States if there are no extenuating circumstances causing this? Germany was soon awash with paper money. The result was a hyperinflation. A loaf of bread that in Berlin cost around 160 marks at the end of 1992 costed $200 billion in marks less than a year later. And so, folks, I'm going to make this short and sweet. You know, when the Nazis took over, Hitler issued debt-free currency and defied France, Great Britain, Belgium. What are you going to do about it? And in doing so, he had to build up Germany's military to resist any attempt to extract money from Germany in the process. And of course, after that, accused the capitalists in the country of destroying the country, the capitalists, namely the Jews. And you know what happened next.